A woman in sneakers walks into a tech firm and gets laughed at by the lead engineer. What he doesn't know? She owns the entire company. And when the truth comes out, he's fired in front of the whole team.
She doesn't belong here. Those were the first words Natalie James heard as she stepped onto the bustling engineering floor of the tech giant she secretly owned. Dressed in worn jeans, plain sneakers, and a hoodie 2 sizes too big, Natalie looked every bit the underqualified outsider. No one recognized her, and that was intentional. She had built Novatech from the ground up, watched it transform from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. But now sitting in a penthouse suite far removed from the heartbeat of her company, she realized she didn't know it anymore. So she decided to go undercover. She wanted raw truth, not the filtered reports from executives or the curated PR updates. She wanted to see how her employees were treated, how ideas were nurtured or crushed, and how inclusive her leadership had really made this company. 10 minutes in, the truth hit her like a slap. A young engineer, badge clipped to his chest, smirk pinned to his face, stared her down like she was a trespasser. "Excuse me," he said, eyes narrowing. "This floor's for technical staff only. HR's 2 floors down." Natalie kept her composure. "I'm shadowing for the week," she replied calmly. "Just here to observe." He crossed his arms. "Observe what? This isn't a daycare. We don't need babysitters watching us code." She offered a faint smile, masking the sting. "Noted." The dismissiveness didn't end there. As the day dragged on, so did the sideways glances, the whispering behind screens, the passive-aggressive comments disguised as jokes. "Guess anyone can walk in off the street now?" one whispered. "Maybe she's some exec's girlfriend trying to feel important," another muttered. Natalie listened, logged it, and said nothing. But she saw everything. The women in the room barely spoke in meetings. One brilliant young coder's idea was ignored until a man repeated it. Then it was suddenly genius. A disabled intern struggled with a non-accessible terminal setup while others shrugged. And worst of all, management watched and said nothing. By the second day, Natalie had enough data to launch a silent revolution. But she waited. On Friday, the floor gathered for their weekly demo meeting. Natalie stood quietly in the back, still invisible, still underestimated. "All right," said the team lead. "Before we start, some corporate visitor wants a few minutes. HR, probably. Natalie, something?" She stepped forward. Half the room didn't look up. "I am Natalie James," she said, voice cool and steady. "CEO of Novatech." Silence fell like a guillotine. Someone dropped a coffee cup. She scanned the room, locking eyes with the engineer who had called her a babysitter. "For the past week, I've watched how you treat newcomers, women, interns, and each other. I've seen the cracks beneath the surface of our so-called culture." Her voice sharpened. "Starting today, there will be changes. Radical ones. You've spent the week judging me by what I wear. Now, I'll judge you by what you build, and how you build it." She smiled, deadly calm. "And I don't need a badge to belong here." By the second day, Natalie saw the truth with painful clarity. This wasn't a team. It was a boys' club with keyboards and inflated egos. Most of the engineers barely acknowledged her presence. She became a ghost in their eyes, someone to sidestep, ignore, or joke about when they thought she couldn't hear. But Ethan, clearly the self-appointed king of the floor, was different. He didn't just ignore her, he targeted her. He interrupted her mid-sentence during brainstorming sessions, rolled his eyes when she offered insight, and slammed his chair back dramatically any time she hovered near his desk. The tipping point came in the form of a simple bug in the code, one she'd spotted within minutes. "There's a memory leak in the sync function," she pointed out quietly, nodding toward the screen. Ethan barely glanced at her. "There's no leak. he said, waving her off. That code's been battle-tested. Leave the tech stuff to people who actually studied it. The room chuckled, a few snorts and smirks rippling through the engineers like static. Natalie's jaw clenched. She had studied it intensely. She held 3 degrees in engineering and computer science from MIT, Stanford, and Oxford. She'd written code for satellites at age 20, built the original Novatech framework with nothing but pizza, ambition, and a borrowed laptop. But she said nothing. Because this wasn't about proving herself to Ethan. This was about watching, documenting a toxic culture that thrived on belittlement, exclusion, and unchecked arrogance. She wasn't here for praise. She was here for a reckoning. And what she saw was unacceptable. Unacceptable. And about to be dismantled from the top down. Thursday morning arrived with a tension so thick it could be cut with a stylus. Natalie stood quietly at the back of the room during the daily stand-up, her notebook tucked under one arm, her eyes tracking the flow of conversation. The team was floundering. The flagship project, an AI-driven infrastructure engine, was weeks behind schedule, and no one seemed to agree on why. A dozen engineers argued over queries and data load times, all while ignoring the obvious. Natalie finally spoke. If you restructure the database schema to normalize the tables and reduce redundancy, you'll cut your load time by 35% and prevent conflicts with the sync function. A few heads turned. Ethan groaned loudly. Right, he scoffed, arms crossed. We're not taking architecture advice from someone who probably Googled the term 5 minutes ago. The room laughed, nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter all the same. Natalie said nothing. Her hands stayed calmly at her sides. She wasn't angry, not yet. Not even when Ethan walked to the whiteboard and dramatically erased her diagram with a thick red marker. This, he said, drawing a messy outline of his own version, is why diversity hires should stay out of engineering. It's not charity work. It's math. The silence that followed was deafening. Gasps, shifting feet, averted eyes. Even the bravest of the bunch didn't defend her. Shame and discomfort radiated like heat, but no one moved. That was it. Natalie slowly stood, brushing imaginary dust from her jeans. She walked to the center of the room with the kind of deliberate calm that made people more nervous than if she'd screamed. She looked at Ethan, smiled. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. "I'll take it from here." He blinked. "What do you mean, take it?" She reached into her back pocket, pulled out a sleek black badge with gold trim, and held it up for everyone to see. "Natalie James," she said, her voice clear and unshakable. "Founder, lead engineer, and CEO of Novatech." Silence cracked like thunder. Chairs creaked as people shifted in disbelief. A coffee mug slipped from someone's hands and shattered on the floor. The color drained from Ethan's face as his smirk vanished. "I spent this week watching," Natalie continued, "watching how this team collaborates or fails to. Watching how voices are ignored, dismissed, or erased. Watching the culture we've allowed to fester." She turned to the rest of the team. "This company was built on innovation, intelligence, and inclusion. I didn't fight through countless boardrooms and buyouts to let it rot from the inside out." Her voice dropped to a deadly softness. "Effective immediately, there will be changes. Some of you will stay. Some of you will not." Ethan stepped back, mouth half open, but no words came. Natalie looked around the room one last time, then walked to the whiteboard and rewrote her original diagram. Clean, efficient, brilliant. "We'll start with the database," she said, "and then we'll rebuild the culture." Ethan's face drained of color. The smirk he wore like armor crumbled. He looked around the room for support, but found only wide eyes and tight lips. Someone dropped their coffee, the mug shattering on the tile with a sound that echoed like a gavel. What? He stammered, his voice suddenly small. Natalie stood tall, unwavering. I've been shadowing my own staff all week, she said, her voice no longer soft or polite, but commanding. And what I've seen is alarming. Not just incompetence, but a toxic, discriminatory environment. No one dared interrupt. Every eye in the room was on her now. The door behind them clicked open. The HR director, Angela Royce, entered the room with a quiet grace that masked the storm she brought with her. She nodded to Natalie, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the team with a measured, unreadable gaze. Effective immediately, Natalie said, her gaze locked on Ethan. You are terminated for misconduct and violation of our inclusion policies. The room went still. Breathing halted. Ethan's lips parted as though he might argue again, but no words came. This is ridiculous, he finally sputtered. You're firing me just because I didn't agree with your stupid design? Natalie took a step forward. Her calmness was more terrifying than any outburst. No, she said coldly. I'm firing you because you humiliated someone you thought was beneath you. Because you weaponized arrogance and exclusion to maintain power. Because you judged a book by its cover. And now, you're out of the library. Angela stepped beside Ethan. Please come with me. You'll have a chance to collect your belongings. Security will assist you. He glanced around, searching for an ally, but no one moved. Even those who had laughed at his jokes now stared down at their shoes, faces pale. I built half this system, Ethan muttered, voice cracking. And poisoned the other half, Natalie replied. As Ethan was led out of the room, silence followed. It was thick with shame and awakening. Natalie turned back to the group. Let me be clear. This isn't just about Ethan. This is about the culture we allowed to grow in silence. A culture where the loudest voice drowned out the smartest ideas. Where differences were mocked instead of celebrated. Where potential was buried under ego. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I've watched bright minds stay quiet because they feared being mocked. I've seen team leads take credit for work they didn't do. And I've heard enough offhand comments to know that what's broken here isn't just the project, it's the foundation. Some employees looked shaken, others looked relieved. A young woman near the back raised her hand hesitantly. Miss James, what happens now? Natalie softened slightly, nodding to her. Now, we rebuild. She walked over to the whiteboard, still marked with the chaotic scrawl Ethan had drawn. She wiped it clean with a single stroke. We rebuild the project, she said. With smarter structure, smarter leadership, we start collaborating, not competing. The toxic days are over. She turned, voice rising just slightly. I'll be working here. With you. In this room. Every day for the next 6 weeks. If you got ideas, I want to hear them. If you've been silent, now is your time to speak. We're not just building tech anymore. We're building a culture that earns its place at the top. No one clapped. Not yet. But something shifted. Shoulders straightened, eyes lifted. Natalie looked to the young woman again. What's your name? Priya, she said softly. Well, Priya, Natalie said, smiling. I liked your database solution in Monday's report. It was the only one that caught the sync loop bug. I want to hear more from you. Priya blinked. You read that? I read everything. A few others murmured their own quiet acknowledgments. A sense of possibility crept into the room, like light through a cracked ceiling. Consider this your second first day, Natalie said. You're no longer just engineers. You're engineers of this company's future. And if you're not ready for that, there's the door. A man in the back raised his hand. "Does this mean things will actually change around here?" Natalie smiled, but this time there was fire behind it. "It means they already have." By the second day, Natalie saw the truth with startling clarity. This wasn't a team. It was a boys' club with keyboards, caffeine, and unchecked egos. She'd hoped her presence might go unnoticed, so she could observe authentically. But instead of being invisible, she was irrelevant. Most of the engineers barely acknowledged her. Some gave curt nods, others didn't bother hiding their confusion or disdain. She caught sideways glances and muttered jokes, always just out of earshot. Except, they wanted her to hear, to feel the chill of not belonging. But Ethan was different. He didn't whisper. He dismissed her ideas outright. If she offered a thought in a meeting, he cut her off with a scoff. If she asked a question, he waved it away like swatting a fly. And when she finally found a bug in their critical system, a subtle logic flaw that would have caused cascading errors in deployment, she spoke up, calm and professional. "There's a conflict in the update algorithm," she said, gently pointing to the screen. "It's overwriting user data on sync." Ethan snorted. "Leave the tech stuff to people who actually studied it," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "This isn't an internship." Laughter rippled across the floor. Not loud, but loud enough. Natalie didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself, even though every cell in her body burned with the injustice. She had studied it. In fact, she'd mastered it. She held 3 degrees, one from MIT, one from Stanford, and a third from Oxford. She had engineered systems used on Mars rovers. She had written the core framework of the very platform Ethan was now mangling. But she said nothing. Because this wasn't about ego. This wasn't about proving herself to a man who needed to diminish others to feel tall. She wasn't here to brag. She was here to watch. And what she saw was unacceptable. Brilliance being snuffed out by arrogance, potential silenced under toxic posturing, ideas killed before they could bloom because they came from the wrong voice, the wrong face, the wrong gender. Natalie quietly logged every interaction. She observed who got credit, who got ignored. She watched how new hires were treated, especially the women and minorities. She saw how leadership turned a blind eye, how silence had become a survival tactic. The code wasn't the only thing broken in this company. By that afternoon, she had already decided this would not continue. Not in her name, not in the company,